You should be live.
All right, thank you. Welcome to the Maritime Advisory Board July regular meeting. My name's Terry Lomax, and I will just go around the window, my open windows as to who is here. We have Beth Bellis, the Annapolis Harbor Master. We have Andrew Fagley, who is a member. We have Jake Iverson, who is a regular participant. We have Debbie Goslin, who is a member, Rita Wildley, who's a member, Rick Nelson, who's a member, Mike Tomasini, who's a member. We have off-screen Madeline from the City of Annapolis TV studio. We have Eric Lashinsky from Department of Planning and Zoning. And we appear to have a quorum, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have a quorum, so we will proceed. The usual first order of business is the approval or changes to the minutes. I should note that I did not call Kimberly name because Kimberly is on vacation this month. So she's going to be working off of the transcript, the recording when she gets in time for the July meeting. But let's look at the June minutes. First of all, are there any changes or corrections to the June minutes? Having none, is there a motion to adopt the minutes from June 18th? Mr. Fagley, so moved. Ms. Goslin seconded. Kimberly, all in favor?
Aye.
All unanimous, Kimberly. Moving to now let's put those aside. Was there any, Mr. Fagley, I think you previously told me there was no MIAB thing to report?
Oh, there was a meeting. It was short and I got notes. They talked there was a fair number of people there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people. They talked about the fixed pump out connection at City Dock at some length. All thinking it was a great idea for everybody. And I pointed out to them that it was basically only useful for boats with onboard pumping systems, which is a small minority of commercial boats and zero of pleasure boats. And they said, yes, but it establishes the pipeline to the sewer system and could be modified in the future possibly or whatever. And in the short term, it fills the bill for the Harbor Queen. So that was a point of discussion. And so it is a non-active pump out. It's just a receiving port on shore. The other one was a draft bill for a zoning modification, and I had no idea what they were talking about, and I don't know what zoning they were talking about. So it went right by me, and that was the gist of the whole discussion.
Was there a bill reference number?
Nope. And they didn't go anywhere with it. They just said, they want to modify it, and they didn't discuss it. They didn't go any far. It really was a non-issue, but I don't know what the point of it was.
Okay. And Debbie, you are on for the July meeting. I don't know whether there's one or not. The August meeting is Duncan, who's not here tonight. And I don't know whether there's one in August yet or not, but if the July meeting would be next Monday, next Monday, if there's going to be one. Just check and see.
Yeah, I'll check and see, because I thought that Alan was going to take my meeting.
Oh, all right. And he may join us later. Just sort that out with him. If there's whichever way you all are, that's fine, as long as somebody's there. Eric, I guess you're covering everybody except the staff reports, if any, except for the Harbor Master's report. So any update on economic development or the task force annual reports that you can share with us, or is that deferred until the next time?
I think it's going to have to be deferred. I don't know the status of the annual reports, unfortunately, but I know Steve and Hope are working on getting the data, but I don't know what the status is.
I saw an email from both Stephen Rice and Hope Stewart that Hope had contracted COVID somewhere along the way, I think, and Stephen wasn't well either. So they both had said that they weren't going to be here tonight. So we'll catch up with them at our next regular meeting, which is going to be in September. You want to fill us in on 012? We briefly were just discussing that, but if you want to fill us in on where 012 stands after the Planning Commission.
Sure. So 012 is the essentially reauthorizing a maritime industry economic fund, which was something that was recommended during the 2021 Maritime Task Force as a way of assisting maritime industry in the city. The idea was it was going to be funded by a fee from non-maritime uses that would be allowed by way of water access incentives. This was a provision that was, as some of you who were involved in that task force might remember, it wasn't supposed to be about public water access, but inevitably there was a lot of discussion about that. And this idea that within the maritime zones, there would be potentially some opportunities for increasing public water access. And perhaps by offering some water access opportunities, property owners could gain some additional non-maritime. And so that was worked out through a zoning update. It's very modest. I mean, I believe you get 5% additional floor area for non-maritime uses by providing public water access amenities from a specific list of options. It ranged from parking close to the waterfront to street and park improvements, a few other things. And there's only one property that I'm aware of that has taken advantage of this water access incentives, and that's the City Marina property, Annapolis City Marina. So that's where the initial funding comes from for this industry fund. It's the idea is that by creating this fund, it would have a place. You would have a place to put those fees, and they would be going back towards maritime businesses in the city through Stephen and Hope's efforts. I don't think the mechanism for how they would be distributed has been fully worked out, but the first thing was to create this fund, which I admit I was not aware it had really been proposed in 1988 when the maritime zones were originally created. And so in some sense, this is reactivating this fund, which was really never put to use. But I just want to be clear that the ordinance does nothing to change maritime zoning. It does nothing to weaken the maritime zoning that is there today or the maritime districts. It is simply creating this fund within the city code and creating a mechanism for how the fees will be put into that fund and who's going to be responsible for that. I think originally in 1988, the Maritime Advisory Board was going to be responsible, and I think we recognized at this point that that's not realistic, and it should be staff that manage that, and so I think that's part of it as well. But there's clearly a lot of confusion about based on feedback we've gotten already that was submitted to the Planning Commission last week. It's in terms of legislative process, the legislation is at Planning Commission. There's a public hearing, the required public hearing last Thursday. We had 4 comments submitted, no live testimony. The Planning Commission is scheduled to deliberate on it this Thursday. And I'm going to give some overview, a few slides just to kind of clarify the context behind this. But I expect there might be some recommendations from the Planning Commission for how to clarify the legislation. I don't know exactly how things will play out, but I think
Eric,
it's
it sounded like, I listened to the planning commission meeting, and it sounded like you were going to offer a rewrite of it. And certainly if you read the bill summary that the staff put out, it says that property owners in maritime zones are required to pay a fee if they don't follow the maritime industry use. So it does sound like it's set up to be a fee in lieu of, and all of the, well, a number of the planning commissioners read it that way also. So from my take on listening to the planning commission meeting, it sounded like they were waiting for a rewrite from you to clarify that.
well.
I
I think
talked
when
to
I
them.
may have said,
Yes.
yeah, I think I proposed to rewrite the staff report, but not the I can't rewrite the legislation. I mean, that comes from city council, and I wasn't involved in writing it to begin with. I'm just, unfortunately, the maritime zoning is one of the most complex parts of our city code, and I think I probably should have been more involved in writing the staff report to begin with, but because I think that might have confused some folks. But it might get further delayed. It might get sent back. I don't know. I mean, I think planning commission has to weigh their options. I mean, that's their.
But Eric, we seem to be making a lot out of obviously a poorly written staff report, to say the least, and as well as perhaps the legislation to some extent. But when all is said and done, there is a fund, I think it's the Maritime Industry Economic Fund or something like that, that is already in the MAB statute. And that fund was never funded, but the fund has existed since 1988. And unless I am mistaken, 02521 provides for a fee under certain circumstances. It's not a fee in lieu. It's exactly how the statute reads. That fee is to be deposited into a fund that by name was a similar name, but that fund had not been created in the 02521. So on the one hand, we have a fund in the MAB from 1988, and we have money generated under 025 with no home. Am I getting this right?
That's right.
And
that's right.
The simple purpose of 012 was to take the money from 02521 and put it into the MAB fund and have it administered by staff.
If that was the purpose, then it should be amended to make that clear.
Right,
and
also, that's where I was getting to.
Oh, sorry.
So with that framework, whatever is necessary, whether it's amended, rewritten, whatever, clarified, whatever a mechanism is appropriate to make that crystal clear is simply what should happen.
And another thing that I'd like to say, the actual goals of the fund, what they were going to be used for in the Maritime Task Force report, I think everybody supported. That was promoting the maritime business districts while recruiting new businesses, retain and support expansion of existing maritime services, and diversifying and expanding workforce training to offer all Annapolitans an opportunity to enter the maritime trades. And the purposes have changed. In the ordinance, the second of the three mirror those, but then they've added two new ones, encouraging public-private partnerships in the development of maritime industrial parks, and providing shared dollars for the receipt of state, federal, and private grants for bay access and waterfront improvement. And I don't know that I support those additional purposes. They seems to be a way to get another way to use that money. And it says right in there that all monies in the fund are subject to appropriation by the city council. So it's definitely different than what we had in 2021.
So
Yeah.
once you cogitate on this and we hear what the planning commission, first of all, would you send the findings of the planning commission? Would you just circulate that to the MAB after they vote next Thursday?
Yes, absolutely.
And then we won't be meeting in August, but we can decide, and council, I don't think will either. So it doesn't sound like it's going to go anywhere before September anyway. But at least circulate it. And if we need to make a recommendation based on
Minimally, we should recommend that the legislation is rewritten for clarity in regard to the non-maritime.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Kimberly, that was unanimous. So I'll write up a report that indicates that the board recommends that based upon the comments made both to the planning commission and to us, that the legislation be rewritten for purposes of clarifying that it is to deposit into the fund to provide a home for the money, and I'm paraphrasing, a home for the money that is generated under 02521 without modifying the purposes of under 02521.
Thank you for adding that last part.
And I just.
So I have a question
Go ahead.
for Mr. Lashinsky. Can you tell me if any other sponsors have picked up this legislation? Because last time I looked, the only sponsor of the legislation was the mayor. Has that changed?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any other sponsors.
I thought Ross was going to be with us tonight, so I was hoping to hear his thoughts on this.
I do not see him, so I guess he is not. All right, any more on 012, 012, whatever it is, 24. All right, Beth, you want to give us a brief update on the Harbor Master's report?
Am I audible?
You're audible.
Great.
Clear.
That's new. So I'm just going to bring it up and go over that. So I try to put things in yellow, highlighting when they're new. And Public Works has been kind enough to help me because I can't always keep up with what the engineers are doing at street ends. So moving from the top to the bottom, the Harbor Master office needs is unchanged from last meeting. And moving down, Tucker Street has new information in yellow provided by Alexis. Gosh, I forget her last name. Essentially, she's saying as a result of the Port Warden's meeting in May, the design is modified to include a longer floating dock as well as a finger pier to provide even more space for launching and docking. The federal and state permits are being modified with new design, and DPW has summoned a motion for reconsideration to the Board of Port Wardens. 6th Street has a meeting tomorrow night at 6:15 at the Bush Library meeting room. Anticipating a Port Wardens hearing in August, and I can't tell you more than that because this is really in the hands of Public Works at this point. Hawkins Cove, we asked for $250,000 for this project. We didn't get that, but we did get a concurrence with the proposal for design and permitting services in the amount of $83,000.98. $83,098, sorry. So they wanted a 50% matching fund grant, and the city will be required to match $41,549. So I guess the short summary of that is Hawkins Cove is moving forward. That's the easy thing to say. And so regarding Shipwright Street, we did get $250,000 for Shipwright Street. I'm excited about this project. I don't know how much other people are. It's a good street end, but it does need improvement. So we're looking forward to that. 4th Street is in disrepair. I'm sure if Ross was here, he'd be excited to learn that we've just secured $250,000 for continued work at this location. Essentially, the dock is not really attached to the substructure. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know how to say that, but like the pilings are not like attached to the dock itself. And there's not that many places in Bat Creek to come ashore. So I'm sure that Mr. Arnett would tell you, like, he's excited about this because this is important.
Well, this is 4th Street at
Davis.
Davis's Pub, not 4th Street on Spa Creek.
Yeah, it's at Davis's Pub.
Okay.
So on June 28th, we got an award letter for $175,000. And I think that's because even though we asked for $250,000, DNR thinks that we can get the job done for $175,000. And I don't think they're wrong. And if we can't, then the city will have to match it. So it's fine. So moving down for the highlights, we're so excited to learn that DNR has awarded us $250,000 for a complete power pedestal upgrade at City Dock. So with the City Dock rebuild, there hasn't been a lot of attention to the waterway itself. And our power pedestals are outdated, to say the least. And so this is a great grant because we didn't actually need an engineer to help us with this grant. I mean, obviously we need a contractor to come to the table with the expertise to do it. But we applied for this on our own without the assistance of Public Works. We got it, and we're happy that it's good timing because as we rebuild City Dock and stuff is all torn up, it's nice to be able to make our power for our boats state of the art.
Beth, are there any restrictions or limitations to who can use those power pedestals with the grant?
Probably. With the award, when they give the award, they don't give us the land use agreement. So that comes later because the award is it's just like a notification, but it's not like when we sign the contracts.
I'm just thinking about previous limitations on the finger piers that it couldn't be used for anything except recreational vessels.
Well, I think even if that were the case, it wouldn't be a further constraint because those areas can't be used by anything other than recreational in the first place.
Yeah, but I didn't know if there were some other ones that they'd come up with. That's what I was asking.
I mean, my hunch is no. I don't think it's going to constrain us anymore. So I think it's going to be all good news. That's my thought. And then moving down towards Trucks and Park Electric Current, I'm pleased to say that Terry was able to be on a meeting with us recently with the contractor. There's a robust report that's come from the contractor regarding all the data they've collected, and they'll be reporting on the 18th at a work session to City Council between 3 and 5 p.m. I don't know if it's a good idea to sort of encapsulate that report. But
well, based on the meeting yesterday, they were adding some tweaks to it, so I wasn't going to try to second guess what they're going to find, what the final report's going to be, other than to say they are presenting to City Council on Thursday at, what is it, 3:30?
3 p.m.
3 p.m. I think that is live, and the report will be basically they'll discuss it. the one thing that I raised with the engineer was as we move forward with City Dock, whatever their findings were with respect to Truxton, which is basically a limited marina facility, we probably should give some consideration as to what effect their findings might have on other water access points in the city, and in particular City Dock, where there are sources, more potential for sources of stray current than probably there were at Truxton Park. I don't know that they're going to necessarily address it, but I did raise it because I think it's something that going forward we had not focused on at City Dock, but it probably should have some overflow impact on what precautions are encouraged at City Dock, if any, given that there's a discussion about launching paddlecraft, et cetera, at City Dock. I think we generally have a consensus about our own thoughts about paddlecraft launching at City Dock, but this is sort of an added point that ought to be at least taken into account before we move forward with paddlecraft or other type of launching at City Craft that might engage people in contact with the water. So that was the point, just a point I raised with them as a point of interest or a point to think about. It does not directly affect their report, as I understand it, at Truxton, but there probably, when the report comes out, probably will be some conclusions that can be drawn that might be applicable to City Dock also. So,
Yeah.
Andy, if you in particular will maybe get a copy of that report, and you can fill us in at our September meeting if you're still here or by remotely, but it would be nice to have your take on it also.
I would be glad to do that. I met with the engineers that came down to Truxton Park and did the setup for the long range testing that they did 2 weeks ago. And it was interesting to see how they were doing what they did and what they were doing. And my feeling on it is they're way more interested in gathering data than determining cause. But that's at least the end of it that was there doing the measuring. So they seem to do a great job, and I'd love to read their report. Or maybe I'll try to listen to this meeting on the 18th.
Any other questions or, I mean, I think at this point we just kind of wait and see what the final report says and go from there.
I mean, I guess as a final thought to what Terry said is I think that your thoughts have a lot of merit. However, I just would remind the group that it's not legal to swim in Ego Alley or within 150 feet of Susan Campbell Park. Not that we're thinking about swimming. I think that Terry's talking about paddlecraft and kayaks, but just to remind the group that that is an ordinance that's in place.
Which is a very wise ordinance.
Yes, very wise. And when you fall off your paddleboard, you hopefully are not swimming very far to get back on it.
But you create two obstacles to avoid in a very busy waterway.
All right. That topic is not going to go away in the near future. Scott and Alan are not here, so we'll pass on the recognition program. Eric, where are we on the comprehensive plan? I know it's gone through. I think, didn't council get an extension on taking it up?
I am happy to say it was adopted last Monday.
Oh,
so they
well,
they officially voted. That's anticlimactic, but yeah, they did get an extension. The state is pretty strict about the timeline, though. So I mean, they used up the initial 90-day allowance, and then they asked for 60-day extension, which was allowed, and then July 11th was really the deadline. So they, at the July 8th meeting, they adopted it with amendments. And we had gone through 5 work sessions with the full council since February 12th, since they had it. So, I'm really happy with the amount of engagement the council had, and this came after planning commission and a really broad cross section of residents and business owners, stakeholders had already participated in developing the plan. So it's it has been approved. We're in the process of kind of formatting it to reflect the amendments of the city council. So what's on the website today is not does not have all of the council's changes, but we'll probably have that done by the end of the week, and then we're going to be trying to figure out, priorities to advance the recommendations of the plan. But
All
it's a big
right.
undertaking.
Eric, any major changes that you might highlight that will be showing up?
So I'm trying to think, like, stuff that would be relevant to this group. I mean, in general, the big thing is we're really trying to create a city that is climate resilient and where there are more options to get around for how, mobility wise, housing, public water access. I think those are sort of the big challenges in my mind. And the way we accomplish that, one primary way is through our development regulations and being more, I would say, up to date on what those look like and how they can yield better results in the city. I mean, I think one thing that came out of the comprehensive planning process is just that, we're a city, oddly, people come to visit to get out of their cars, but yet it's really impossible to be successful in the city without having your own car. I mean, it's hard to get around the city on foot, on bike, by transit. So that's one aspect, is trying to make the city more accessible, more connected, so you don't have to drive everywhere. And that, if we can do that, we're going to have a huge impact on our environment, huge positive benefit there. We're going to reduce traffic congestion. We're going to make the city a lot safer. It'll be easier to get to the waterfront where, there's limited parking. And so that's one big thing. We're a lot more clear about, if you look at the future land use map, which is a really, probably the most important exhibit in the plan. It shows up in the land use chapter. We're much more clear than past comprehensive plans about where the natural areas of the city are. We have a kind of categorized a whole group of properties in the city, which are environmental enhancement areas. And these are primarily sensitive places where development really shouldn't happen. Some of it wouldn't happen already, but we also categorize a lot more property in the future land use map as appropriate for mixed use development, which is essentially a more efficient, smarter way to, we're a city that's already built out. We're not expanding really anymore. We're not, all we really have is to sort of work with the land that we already have within the city limits for the most part. And there will be redevelopment happening in the next 20 years. Question is, will it be more efficient in how it uses the limited land base that we have? If you look at the way we've developed over the last 50 to 75 years, it's been very suburban, and we're looking at trying to be more smart about how we develop. And so mixed use is a proven way of being more efficient in how we develop, situating compatible land uses close together, so you have less infrastructure to service them. And I'd say our maritime districts are one of the perfect examples of that, where you have multiple different types of businesses locating close to each other, and they complement each other. And I think that there's lots of really good examples of mixed use all over the city, but the maritime districts are certainly one of them. And yeah, that's some of what we're looking at. But I encourage everybody just to kind of browse through it. You'll probably learn some things about Annapolis, just kind of going through the plan. And there's a lot in there. We actually developed an action plan because the full plan is pretty big. The action plan is a lot thinner, and I think the action plan is what will end up being a reference for most people. It has an executive summary, and it has a summary of all the goals and recommended actions. So,
Very good.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
The next item I think Beth already touched on, and that was the harbor master's office layout, that there's no change from the last report. So we can pass on that one, which brings us to the new business. Eric, you want to fill us in on where we stand on the Equitable Public Water Access Plan, which is a very comprehensive document. It's not quite as comprehensive as the comprehensive plan, but it's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, it's a lot thinner than the comprehensive plan. It's probably a little more accessible. It's only about 70 pages, but yeah, it's pretty comprehensive and pretty ambitious. I have the presentation that we gave to the public. We had 2 presentations at Pip Moyer in the last few weeks, and I'll pull that one up. I'll kind of go through it, and I'm happy to take questions along the way, just because it's a small group and it's pretty informal. Let me see if I can share my screen here. I'm not going to be able to see you, I think, when I present. So just, I would say just interrupt me. Let's see here. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'll probably gloss over a few of the slides, just that are maybe less important for you all are a bit more informed about the waterfront. I appreciate that. But yeah, this is the cover of the plan. We've gotten a lot of comments already. So we're in a comment period right now. We have over 115 comments already. Most of those, I'd say, are coming through our website for the plan, which I'll show you in a bit, where we have a survey link that people have been using to submit comments. And these are some that we've already received. This is, a draft plan. So it is certainly not a perfect plan. They never are when we first release them. We're really sincere in wanting comments from folks that can help make this a better plan. I know we've already identified some big things that were missed, partners that the city has that, should have been acknowledged, because we are trying to, as part of this plan, include a whole range of programs and partnerships that the city can leverage to improve public water access. But this is just a sampling of what we've already heard, to give you a sense of what's on people's minds. We've been thinking about the initial takeaways from those, from what we've heard so far, and I'll talk about this issue of privately owned sites. That's one, I would say, particularly high profile aspect of the plan that's gotten a lot of attention. There's a lot of interest in the plan addressing sites beyond the city, but that's not really the intent of this plan. Wildlife and environmental assets are clearly a part of our waterfront. Not every water access site has a amount of natural resource to protect, but some do, and there's opportunities to create more natural resources at virtually all the sites. There's a lot of interest in the opportunity sites that we have something like 60 opportunity sites identified in this plan. Many of them are actually already city parks where we identify improvements, enhancements that should happen. And so when we call these opportunity sites, it's a little bit of a misnomer. Many of them are already here. We do have a mapping tool. This GIS tool is referring to a mapping tool that we've developed that we're also seeking comment on. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's a tool that we hope will help people get around the waterfront and know where different sites are today and help spread around the use, so people don't go to the same sites all the time. And we think that'll help manage expectations of what people expect when they go to these sites. So yeah, just a little bit of background. I think you've probably already heard this before. This is something we developed, a kind of postcard of Annapolis that tries to articulate the need here. We have a lot of waterfront. Very little of it is truly public. So that's one point of departure for this plan. Certainly, there's a lot of value to our waterfront economically, and it can't necessarily all be publicly accessible, I would say. I think that's fair to say. But we have room for a lot more improvement. This is my personal anecdote I was sharing with the city residents who came to our public meetings. I grew up going down to Hawkins Cove, believe it or not, through a trail that I tried to find when I moved back to town a few years ago. It's not there anymore, but I noted the Spa Creek Conservancy's efforts to restore the stream feeding Spa Creek, which is a really incredible initiative that they've been doing. So it gave me some new hope, even though I was disappointed to not find that trail anymore. And when I first moved back to town, I admit I was sort of getting reacquainted with Annapolis. I grew up in and was a little bit detached from the place. And people asked me, where could we go to dip our toes in the water? I didn't know what to tell them. I didn't want to send them to Sandy Point State Park. This is candidly, but this process has allowed me to really get more familiar with the variety of sites that we have today in the city. And, virtually all of them have opportunities for improvement, but none of them are really this type of site. They're all kind of quirky in their own way. I think the transformation of the waterfront that we see today, really began with this going from a working waterfront to more of a recreational waterfront. Sort of obvious to, I think, most of you. Kind of set in motion a lot of changes on the waterfront that we see today. The plan doesn't really address the city dock project. That's already happening. It's its own thing. But I think the fact that there's a lot of other waterfront beyond the city dock that needs attention is really the point of this plan. A lot of it is in the neighborhoods of the city, for people who may not have an interest in coming downtown, or, just want to have a more simple waterfront experience. This is one thing I came across when I was preparing. I was interviewing for my job, and I came across this headline, and it kind of startled me a little bit. There's obviously a lot more to the story than just the headline, but it kind of pointed to the fact that this is an important issue in the city. And I would say it's a top 3 issue, right after climate change impacts and housing affordability. Public water access has relevance to how we recreate, kind of economy we have, the culture of the city. It's really an integral aspect of Annapolis, obviously, and it connects all of us. So I think for a lot of people who aren't familiar with Annapolis, they're surprised to hear that public water access has such precedence, but it's true. I mean, it's access today, it's probably not as good as what it was when I was a kid, because partly it's been formalized in ways where it was previously much more informal and it seemed to work okay. But now everything is more formal. And if we want to protect public water access, we have to, try to formalize it and make sure that it's clear where places are public and where they're not. This is also an important aspect to be aware of. There is a history to this city, history of inequity. Even this article was from 1992, was already starting to describe a kind of segregated city that was becoming more pronounced. The writer of this article was actually at our last public meeting, to my surprise. I didn't catch her name, but many of you may be familiar with this book, The Other Annapolis, profiles the African Americans' experience in the city, which is unique. And I think understanding how limited options to access the waterfront have impacted different segments of our population is a really important part of this project. We also got recommendations from the Maritime Task Force in 2020 and 2021. I mentioned earlier, wasn't supposed to be part of this task force. It wasn't supposed to be a major part of the task force, but it inevitably became one. And we had Wendy O'Sullivan, the superintendent for the National Park Service, Chesapeake region, was on that task force. And they really stepped up to fund this plan when the recommendation came up that we need some kind of a plan if we're going to try to improve water access. The city has never done a citywide public water access plan, to my knowledge. And so this was kind of a vision that came out of that task force. And these elements are really still the substance of the plan, these 5 pieces here on the chart. So just quickly, a few frequently asked questions. So as you talk about this plan to other people, this might help to clarify. This is a 20-year plan, or more than 20. I mean, it's really looking far into the future. I don't know when we're going to have another one, or maybe perhaps we'll update this plan in the future, but this is the first one we've done, and we really want to be forward thinking about it. Certainly some recommendations are going to be prioritized over others, the ones that are more easily implemented, more easily funded. There's low-hanging fruit for sure. And all of those are prioritized in the plan based on kind of short-term, medium-term, and long-term timelines. The plan does not really get into the details of the Truxton Park electrification issue, as you were talking about that before. I mean, that's also kind of a separate investigation. The plan would like to restore access that previously existed at the site. I mean, that's obviously contingent upon safety, but that's an important access site for a whole variety of activities. And I think it's going to be hard to find another site in the city that can provide that whole range of activities that were once a part of that location. Is the city going to take people's land to make all parks public? No. There's been a lot of misinformation about this. I'll go into the details of this aspect in a minute, but the plan does not include any recommendations that would compel a private property owner to open their property to the public. Full stop. It's not in the plan, and I'll talk about why we do include some private sites as long-range recommendations in the plan, but they're recommendations that put decision-making squarely on the property owner, not on the city. Does the draft plan address the city dock project? It doesn't really get into I mentioned before, it doesn't really get into the details of the city dock project. It does recommend completing the project as it's currently envisioned, which includes the Maritime Welcome Center and reuse of the historic Burrs House. Doesn't get into Greenbury Point. And in fact, to the degree it addresses sites outside the city, there's just a few immediately adjacent sites to the city that we identified. Does this draft plan address Wells Cove? It doesn't really get into the details of Wells Cove either, but it does provide a recommendation on advancing planned improvements to the site. And I know this is a site that's really in flux. related to legal proceedings. So, we're just kind of following that closely. But there was a city council resolution that directed staff to make plans for improvements to that site, and that happened while we were working on the public water access plan. So we had been following that direction. How long will the comment period be open? Through August 30th. We can extend it if needed. We're really not in a rush to finalize this plan. I'll just be candid. I think we want this plan to get it right. We recognize there's a lot of scrutiny of this plan, a lot of interest and passions about water access. I think in best case scenario, a final plan might get adopted by the end of the year by the city council, but we certainly want to make sure we hear everybody and make important changes that need to happen to the plan. So how we're going to handle comments? Well, we already have a link to a comment log on the plan website. I'll show you what that looks like in a sec. Everybody can see the comments that were submitted. We don't put people's name, they're not attributed to specific people. So there's some privacy respected there. We're going to update that log weekly. And then once the comment period is over, staff will review the comments, and if changes are needed, we're going to propose those changes and share those with the public, probably in follow-up meetings, and post proposed changes to the website so everybody's clear about what we're looking at. I think it's interesting to use the comprehensive plan as a precedent. We had like over 200 comments during the 90-day review period, and something like 30% of those comments resulted in pretty substantial changes to the plan. So, some comments will be outside the scope of the plan. Some will be already addressed in the plan. There'll be some that certainly need to be, I think, picked up to improve the plan. This is what that survey link looks like on the website. And that's the way a lot of people have been submitting comments. Again, I'll show you what the website looks like in a second. Right now, actually. So this is the website on the city's page. I'll show you. So you can just Google Annapolis Public Water Access Plan, and this is the first thing that comes up. But it's within the Department of Planning and Zoning. We have a promo PSA from the mayor. Here's a link to read the draft plan. It takes you to the PDF, which you can download and is far cheaper to print than our comprehensive plan. We have this mapping tool that I think is pretty cool, and I think could be very helpful. It really is all about helping people see the places where different waterfront activities make sense. I think some of these might change in terms of recommendation, and I think that's fine. This is a tool that could be updated very easily, so it's maybe more sensible than having a printed brochure or map. But I hope you check that out. And you keep scrolling down, you can see how to comment. This is the link to the survey, and then the link to the comment log, which all these open up new windows. And this is what that comment log looks like. You can see it's pretty thorough. And then we're gonna, if we have events coming up, we're gonna list those here. But this is the presentation that you're watching right now, and we also have some press that we've gotten on the plan so far. Finally, this is just some of the maps in the plan. And then we actually looked at some precedent plans from other places that we felt did things right in different ways. And so Newport, Alexandria, and some places that might not seem comparable to Annapolis, metropolitan Portland, Oregon, and Twin Cities, New York City. obviously much different than Annapolis, but they all did really ambitious things with their waterfront that I think we learned lessons from. So getting back to the presentation, this is how we define public water access in the plan. Physical access by the general public to the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries. Public water access sites and facilities can provide access from land to water, water to land, as well as providing opportunity for viewing, fishing, swimming, boating, or other activities at the water's edge. So it's pretty broad. It's not just about getting in the water, but it's about appreciating the experience from the land. Not every site is the ideal place to get into the water. Certainly we want as many of those as possible, but we recognize that it's pretty diverse in kind of activities that can happen. And we got to that definition from asking people about water access. There was a survey early in the process that we got over 500 responses to. This was posted at all the existing water access sites and promoted across the city. We did 3 focus groups, and this is really intended to balance the participation. You know, it's challenging for us to reach a population that's truly representative of the city, racially and economically and age-wise, and so this was an effort to try to balance that. And we got some really candid, blunt responses to the questions that were asked during these focus groups, you know, stuff like this. That is partly why we have a plan that might seem very ambitious to some people, if not, you know, aggressive. But, you know, I think for people who haven't really had the access to or haven't felt welcome on the waterfront, you know, the plan is trying to address their concerns as much as others who haven't had that experience. So equity is really an important part of this. Just kind of getting towards the end here, you know, just what's in this plan. These are the 5 pieces. You know, this is consistent with what we heard at the Maritime Task Force. It's not just about what's here today, but what other sites can we add? What are the improvements we can make to our existing sites? What do we mean by equitable public water access infrastructure? You know, what does that look like? And so we actually have goals that talk about that. We're really interested in program and partnership initiatives, identifying every business, organization, association that is interested in helping people get to the water and experience the waterfront. And we want to expand on those. And then finally, alternative mobility initiatives on land and water is about getting people around the city in ways that don't really require a car. So really everything else. And it's partly because we have very limited parking at our waterfront. And there's a lot of interest in getting around the city by water for those who don't typically do that. As I mentioned, we released a draft plan on the left and then this mapping tool on the right. Both are open for public comment right now. If you look at the table of contents in the plan, there's an existing conditions section. A lot of that is a summary of something we released about a year ago that looks like this. The Annapolis Public Water Access Inventory Summary Report and Needs Assessment. I mentioned that Park Service was the funder of this and has been really engaged. The Volpe Center was our I should have mentioned this at the beginning. They were our consultant. They're an interesting division of the U.S. Department of Transportation that works, they're kind of like a think tank. They work with a lot of national parks and other local government agencies to develop better access and mobility projects primarily, but they get into water access inevitably with a lot of their projects. Our site inventory assessment looked like this. We went to every single existing site and had a kind of a scorecard that looked at site characteristics, site features, active uses, surrounding amenities, accessibility and mobility, wayfinding and signage, green infrastructure. a lot of this is captured in an appendix document that we're still kind of formatting, and we're going to be releasing that this week. But it gave us this kind of information, in terms of access. These are 4 metrics that we were looking at. A lot of the sites don't score well in terms of public transit. I would say that's a big question in our comprehensive plan is, how could transit better serve the city? It's not something that's really catering to a broad population right now. Trail connections also don't really get to the waterfront so well, but sidewalks do. And then signage is a huge problem. It's, I would say, low-hanging fruit. This is an example. We got into the details of signage in the site inventory, because it's not just about wayfinding signage, but it's interpretive signage, regulatory signage. Who's enforcing things or who's managing the site. And many of you already know this, but there's a wide range of signs at our water access sites that aren't consistent. They're outdated in many cases. They clutter the sites. We really want to move forward in the short term with signage standards so every site will have the same looking signage and help people understand they're within a network of sites that are all kind of part of the same system. And then these things on the table of contents, kind of what we're really looking for comments on: opportunity sites for new and improved public water access, goals for equitable public water access, program and partnership initiatives, alternative mobility initiatives, and the action plan, or it's a summary. So finally, this is what our existing access site map looks like. I think I feel confident we've hit all the sites. It took a while to, believe it or not, get to this. A lot of sites, even, ones that the city owns, are managed by different departments, and there's some confusion in the public about who's doing what, and so we wanted to clarify. I mentioned we had 60 opportunity sites. Many of these are already existing sites that just need improvements, and then we found other sites that don't exist today. We organized all the recommendations for these locations by creek shed. So this is an example of Severn River opportunity sites and Weems Creek opportunity sites, where part of the table is new public water access, and then below the light blue heading is improved public water access sites. And you see we have level of priority, the phase that we're in currently, ownership, partnership, organizations. We may have missed some here, so that's hoping people look at that. We're doing a lot of work already. I think about 26 of those 60 sites are already active projects in our capital budget. These are 2 new planning initiatives we just kicked off on Weems Creek and College Creek, where we have very poor public water access today. Weems Creek just has Tucker Street Park, and College Creek has 2 city-owned sites, but they're both in very poor shape, and they're both active projects: Northwest Street Park and Robert Eads Park, which is at the headwaters. A lot of people use the St. John's College waterfront, but that's not really an official public park. It's just sort of open to the public, I would say. So we've had really good turnout at some recent meetings for these sites. They're both very different, but there's good support for both of them. This is that aspect of the plan that I think has been shared, pretty widely, and I think there's some misinformation about what the intent is. This idea of including privately owned sites was really about thinking broad, far into the future. We have 10 sites listed here that are privately owned, and they range from homeowners association properties today to church properties. There's a Navy property. There's one or two apartment complexes. these are sites that meet certain criteria. And the idea was, well, they're all in locations where there's gaps in public water access today. The only way that we're going to improve water access in most of these locations is by partnering with property owners that have water access that's not open to the public today. And so we were kind of agonizing over this, trying to decide if this was even worth including. But I'll just go ahead and read this passage just so we're all clear. I mean, this plan looks at least 20 years into the future and envisions a city where equitable public water access for all residents is a defining feature. To realize this vision, some sites that are currently privately owned and not should be publicly accessible are included in this plan for consideration as opportunity sites. These sites are addressed separately here due to their privately owned status. Inclusion of these specific sites in the plan is based on the following criteria. The site is located in an area with limited public water access. The site's proximity to existing public waterfront could foster a connection to expand public water access. There's feasibility of integrating with the city's park system. While predicting the future of the city's waterfront is challenging, Annapolis today has examples of both private sites that were formerly public and public sites that were formerly private. This plan positions the city to be able to expand the public water access network if and when there's an interest by private property owners to convert private water access sites to public, given that circumstances consistently and continuously change. It's understood that any change in the status of these privately owned sites must be initiated by the owner, not the city, and the ultimate decision on whether to make a site accessible to the public resides with the current property owner. So it's really, with many of these sites, I personally don't envision anything changing in the near future. Some of these might take decades to even become something that people can, see some potential for. But this is a long-range plan, so it's hard to really start the discussion without putting the idea out there. Program and partnership initiatives, we really want to be comprehensive in capturing the whole range of partners out there that can help increase opportunities on the waterfront. And so we want to make sure that everybody takes a look at that and suggests any organizations, businesses that we're missing. They're kind of organized by different categories. And then alternative mobility initiatives. Just we're trying to capture all the things that could improve transportation to and around the waterfront. And then finally, the goals and actions. 6 goals: accessibility, community focused, connectivity, resilient design, equity, and policy. And then for each of those goals, we have actions that we want to put into start implementing. Some are easier to do than others. Some require city council action. For example, under policy, and this one might need to be clarified, but we have the bottom of the list here: amend the zoning regulations for all waterfront land uses, with the exception of single-family home, to require public water access based on the definition. I think it refers to the definition in this plan, but I think that the intent with this was just to, when redevelopment happens in the city, particularly with larger sites, we don't really have the tools today to improve public water access. I think that's been clear with various recent redevelopment projects, where there's always some negotiation that happens during the process, as the project goes through planning commission and tries to meet the adequate public facilities requirements, et cetera. But I think to really create the waterfront that would be more publicly accessible, we need more policy tools to do that. And when you look at places that have connected waterfronts with esplanades or greenways or they have those tools and we don't. And so this is something that will certainly need more consideration from the city council. And I don't expect that to happen, tomorrow, but it's just an idea that's put out in this plan. So that's the overview, and I'm happy to take any questions. Let me talk for a while.
It's really well done, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good to hear. I know some of you have already heard this, so apologize. Thanks for sitting through it again.
So Eric, if I understand this, the plan as it meanders through will take somewhat the similar path as a comprehensive plan, in that you've had a draft, you've had public comments, you make a revisions to the plan, and then it's submitted for approval by city council. And at that point, it comes to planning commission, it comes to MAB, et cetera.
That's right. It's a little bit, the difference with the comprehensive plan is that we have some more flexibility in, we're not bound by some state requirements. It doesn't, it kind of starts with the city council rather than ends, ultimately it will end with the city council too, but yeah, there would be a resolution to adopt the plan ultimately, and then that would go to planning commission and different city council committees, and it'll get thoroughly worked over for sure.
All right. Any other questions of Eric? Obviously, the plan is available. It's detailed. It's comprehensive in the sense that it covers an awful lot of material. And I encourage those of all of us on the board to at least take a look at it and sort of follow it, because it's going to come back up probably for a recommendation from us at some point, along with a number of other committees and commissions.
Yeah, Eric, this is Rick Nelson. Just one question. Were there any kind of estimates in terms of what funding might be necessary to accomplish this? I know it's a longer term plan, and number of people would have to initiate things, but was there any ballpark thinking as to what government might need to put forward?
Well, that was a comment we heard at our last public event that I thought was good. Good to hear. I think what we're going to end up doing is going through each recommendation and trying to put a relative cost. Something we did in the comprehensive plan. It's really hard to put exact numbers down for projects that aren't designed yet per se, but you can at least say, well, these recommendations are going to be at the higher end. These are going to be the lower end. Some just require staff time. Some require, finding capital money. So I think we're going to try to be more clear about that. A lot of the resources we already have are in the capital budget. We have more money committed to public water access in this year's budget than ever before. Last year was really the beginning of a big change from the city council, in my view, where we actually had dedicated funding for bulkhead improvements that were just kind of deferred maintenance for a long time. Now there's a dedicated fund, just like we have for roadways, that's going to be trying to keep up with. That's just one example, the bulkheads and the boardwalk. So there's a recognition that we need to do a better job on that, and we have more money for planning public water access, and there's a lot of very specific. Beth mentioned a number of projects. There's probably a dozen standalone projects in the capital budget for public water access sites. So the money comes from the general fund, from bonds, from grants, and there's probably some enterprise funding from watershed restoration fund. So it comes from a variety of sources. That's what I anticipate to be done.
Good, thank you.
Yes, Jake.
Hey, thank you. Eric, I just want to reiterate what I mentioned at one of the water access meetings is a 70 page report. And I was rather surprised that Watermark wasn't mentioned, although the private partnership was. The only place Watermark was mentioned in this was improving signage at the street ends or the water taxi stops. And then also coming up with an app that links the circulator with water access points, which we do have. And I think you were unfamiliar with, and maybe some of the people in the city were unfamiliar as well. But we do link that, and we've had it for a couple of years now, 4 years, 5 years now. And we have 30,000 subscribers to the application. So I was just surprised that that's the only place we were mentioned. Now, the second meeting you did come back and you said you need to improve on it. I'm just hopeful that happens.
Yeah, it will. It was a really big, gap in, coverage. I think I don't have a good excuse, to be honest with you. I think we want to be comprehensive in the whole range of organizations out there and companies that are really helping to improve access to the water. And I would recognize Watermark as one of those. I don't know how we missed that. So the app is something we'll definitely be looking at because we don't want to reinvent the wheel here. I think if there's something out there that works already, we should leverage that. So.
Eric, I think that it's obviously y'all have done a tremendous amount of work on this, and the city's to be lauded for creating awareness of the public waterfront properties and for also focusing on improving them. I do think that it starts out unnecessarily negative with that slide of only 10% is public access. I just think it sets a tone that you don't need and that may not help the efforts to create more access. So I just may want to think about the sort of branding and marketing of the message and the tone.
Okay, thanks for that input. See what you're saying.
Any other questions or comments? We will segue to the last two substantive items, although they're not real big. I put on here the lad electric boat.
Thank you all.
Oh yes, thank you, Eric.
Terry, I will be back. I'll be looking forward to sharing, kind of comprehensive comments that we hear about the plan, probably after the comment period. So please spread the word to everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring up, so for those of you that know Rob Ladd, he's a yacht designer here local. When the mayor put out floated the idea of an electric boat, Rob actually came up with a concept design for an electric boat that was submitted to the mayor's office. It's percolating out there. It's really just an FYI that we have somebody with local connections that actually responded to that's the suggestion that for an electric ferry, or it's really it's not a water taxi. It's sort of a hybrid of a electric ferry taxi / whatever. I think was designed to carry a bicycle or something, but I have not seen it coming from the city. I just happened to run into Rob Ladd and he mentioned it. And so I thought I would just bring it to everybody's attention. Rick raised the question of signage, speed signage, no wake zone signage. And I think, Mike, you weighed in on that also earlier this month. My understanding is that those that type of signage slash positioning of that type of signage falls with DNR. And if Beth is listening, maybe she can enlighten us, but I didn't think the city was in the sign business on the water in terms of either fixed signs or buoys. I know certainly private property owners are free to put up a sign that says no wake or watch your wake or whatever. But in terms of the city actually increasing on the water buoyage with speed notice, speed restrictions, et cetera. Am I correct that it's a DNR issue, not a city issue, Beth? You're on mute.
It's all right, Beth. I can answer for you.
Yeah.
So, Terry, I think the reason this is probably on the agenda tonight is because after a pretty long week leading into the 4th of July, I noticed what I considered to be some near misses in the harbor with juvenile boaters and then juvenile behavior of adult boaters. And so I reached out to Beth just as I had noticed that the buoys that line the Severn River leading up to Horn Point at the entrance to the 6 mile an hour zone either were missing or misplaced. And I thought that a few more might be able to do some good. So I reached out to Beth, and Beth responded with a couple of opportunities for me to reach out to DNR directly in an effort to try and improve the situation. My first go round was to reach out to the enforcement personnel. So I called dispatch and asked if I could speak with a lieutenant for Anne Arundel County, and who basically told me that they have nothing to do with the placement of the buoys, and that they have limited ability to come down and do regular enforcements because of all of the other things that they're tasked with.
I'm sorry.
Attempt number 2 was to reach out to the hydrographic division, who handles the placement of the buoys and making sure that they're well maintained and in good order and people can read them. And so I had sent an email off to John Gallagher, who heads up that division. And then to try and strengthen my point, I reached out to a bunch of local business owners and organization heads to say, I think that this is a problem. I think that all of you realize that this is a problem, and that I think that our voice together will be a little bit louder than, just me asking for additional signs. So I reached out to Annapolis Sailing School. I reached out to Crab. I reached out to Jake. I reached out to SSA, EYC, AYC, and Annapolis Canoe and Kayak next door to me, and just said, I think there's a lot of different uses in this harbor, and some of those uses don't combine well with large wakes and people who aren't paying attention to signage. So if you're needed, will everybody be willing to sign on to a letter that says basically that we need additional signage and enforcement for safety reasons? But I was pleasantly surprised that after maybe a few days more than I thought it would take, I got a response back from Mr. Gallagher at DNR. And he said, what do you think you need? And I said, well, right now there are 3 buoys out there. And he said, well, we can evenly space those 3 buoys. And I said, well, is there a chance that you could evenly space them as 6 buoys? And he said, well, I think we could probably do that. Let me just make sure I have them in reasonable working order. He then the next day in maybe 15 to 20 mile an hour winds directly east off of the bay, sent his crew out to place buoys in a straight line from Triton Light to Horn Point. So there are additional buoys out there. And I think the next piece of it obviously is going to come in some kind of regular enforcement. It just, for me, it kind of came to a head because it does appear now that weekday boating in the virtual era has become a little bit more common. And that's when the juvenile boaters and the young sailors who are just out there learning and they're now mixing with what was typically just a Saturday and Sunday problem, and it's now become a 7-day-a-week problem. So I was happy that DNR responded so quickly. I'm really thankful to Beth for providing the right contact, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that John Gallagher came through. He always does. He's very good at his job. He's been at it for a very long time. But in terms of enforcement, we were coming out of the harbor today, in fact, and we were seeing boats going way too fast. And to be transparent, our team is not equipped to do radar enforcement.
Right.
So we can educate boaters, we can slow them down, we can write warnings, but it's not fair to say that we could like do ticketing. But I don't think that's necessary to educate and slow down boats. So we can do some of that. But I do think it's unfortunate that you got the response that you did get from the enforcement arm of NRP. And I would say if you have to go up higher, go up higher.
Well, I think I've got enough partners who also recognize the issue that I think if we decided that we had to push it high enough, I think we might get some response.
So Mike, one, I appreciate you initiating this effort, and Beth, your support in that. I mean, it's at the Annapolis Sailing School, we see people just regularly going 10, 12 knots in a, a 5-knot area. And but I do think a lot of them just don't quite realize it, because with the approaches to Back Creek, there's probably 2 buoys. Now, if there's more, then I'd be interested where they are. But you would have to actually go fairly far out on the channels to actually see them. So, how many there are and where they're placed, would I'd be interested. And if more need to be purchased or funded or something such as that, you might be able to find a public-private partnership in terms of that if it's a budgetary issue.
No, I know buoys are expensive, and I don't think the implementation of the buoys, but I almost wonder, and we can talk offline, Mike, I almost wonder if we shouldn't do a diagonal. I could be completely wrong about this, but I do think as a boater, if I'm coming in, it is a little long to come from the outer portion of that 6-knot zone all the way in. So I think that people don't respect it, not because they don't know, but because they don't think it's necessary. So I wonder if we couldn't do a diagonal from the Navy seawall to cut that. I don't know. I mean, we can talk about this offline.
No, I think, Beth, that's a good point, because I'd say, again, off of Back Creek, that marker is fairly far out. The wake doesn't really affect the shoreline, but 300 yards later, it has a big impact on it. So maybe you're right. If they could go faster, further out, and slower as they approach land, and when it starts affecting boats that are docked and sand on the shore.
I'm pretty
good.
familiar with Mike's operation, and I get it. Like he's got. I mean, I would have a hard time, given what I know the pirate boat does. I'd be concerned if there's like 2, 3, 4-foot wake. That's not cool.
Yeah.
So, one thing that comes to mind on the diagonal, one of the natural speed restrictions is Horn Point Shoal. I mean, that's already a natural, pretty much a natural restriction, because other than the flat bottoms of boats, don't go across there in the first place. So maybe, and you all talk offline, I'm just making an observation, but maybe there is some room for either a diagonal or some reconfiguration. I personally appreciate or don't appreciate the fact that it is a long, slow trek from the middle of the Severn River into Annapolis Harbor, particularly when it's not a busy afternoon. But that's where the line is. So maybe some thought to reconfiguring that line, making that line diagonal, jogging it in a little different way is good. Conversely, in the same vein, it's still fairly deep, well inside the line between the Horn Point shoal marker and the entrance to Back Creek. which is enticing for people not to slow down until they get a lot closer to the red marker there. So,
Yeah, a hybrid idea is to do like weekends and holidays like they do in the Magathie as you go towards Gibson Island. So like there would be possibly an idea to do some type of hybrid diagonal.
but as Mike said, and I think Rick probably notices, it's during the week where it's been increasing in terms of the waterside population, and during the week is when their operations are, going on also. So,
Oh,
but
maybe-
I leave it to you all to talk offline on that, but I think there may well be some room for improvements that maybe reduce some of the areas, but upgrade or reinforce some of the other areas.
Yeah, and I would just say in this discussion, we'll break it down between, are you affecting other boaters with the wake in the case of Mike's ship, or are you causing damage to boats that are docked and land? So there may be two different objectives in this. And Beth, just one quick thing. What is the penalty if one's found going over the speed limit? What if you actually write a ticket? How painful is it?
Oh gosh, it used to be. I haven't done this enforcement for 10 years. But from Natural Resources Police perspective, it used to be like $75. It's probably like more than 100 now, if I'm guessing. If I do a civil ticket, it's 200. But again, we're not really equipped because we don't have radar and we don't have my team can't really do a good job on that work.
Right. If they challenge it, and yes, I can see that. So I guess my quick statement would be that's the fine is not very high times the probability of getting one means it's really not much of a deterrent.
Yeah.
Peer pressure is what will modify people's
Yep.
behavior.
Yep.
I don't hesitate to let my horn rip at a boat that's flagrantly exceeding the speed limit. But also, just another point is exiting Back Creek, the Horn Point, the jetty there, opposite Horn Point, on the SSA side, a speed limit sign on that jetty at the end would be helpful, and it should say something like, "This is a restricted speed zone in both directions," because people exiting Back Creek don't know better than to not hit the throttle as soon as they exit if they're not familiar with the area, and they don't know they're still in a restricted speed zone. And
Agreed.
not that their wakes are getting carried out. They're not as detrimental as people that are incoming, but it's just a point, and it would be not a hard place to put up a sign.
Sure.
You're good.
All right.
Thank you.
The last,
Just
yeah,
one
Mike.
last thing, Terry, because as part of this project, I also discovered something else. Apparently, and I think this is probably going to be a Coast Guard issue, not a DNR issue, but apparently one of the diamond-shaped placards from the Horn Point shoal marker is missing and has been located on Naval Academy property by the oceanographic engineering building that's like right there. There is a diamond-shaped green and white signboard with the letters HP on it, just leaning up against the sign of the building. So I'm not sure who to contact at the Coast Guard to get that little piece repaired, but
I know nothing about that.
yeah.
If you send me an email, Mike, I'll make sure I take care of it.
Yeah. Frida, any chance you can carry that sign back to the harbor master's office so that Beth can give it to the Coast Guard?
I'll
Or
look
if you
into it.
throw it in the water, maybe I can have one of my guys row it back into the harbor.
Yeah. I'll ask.
All right.
All right.
That's all on my end.
The final thing on the agenda is we don't have a meeting in August. So everybody go enjoy. Stay cool. Try to stay cool in this hot weather. But with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, Andy?
Terry, yeah, I have one more thing. Could we ask Beth about the abandoned boats in Weems Creek. Any update, any comments? I saw a letter going around between the landowner and I think your office, but can you elaborate?
Sure. Yeah, I think that I think we'll have criminal charges within the week or two. Yeah, so we're in good shape on that one. I wish that Natural Resources Police would have come to the table and taken care of that case. They chose not to, but we will take care of it. But I don't expect it to be moved within until at least 30 to 40 days.
Okay.
We have to follow the protocol with the law.
Okay, thank you.
But also, thanks for your eyes.
Oh yeah. And the other boat that dragged all over the place, I secured to a mooring temporarily and it departed.
Yes, we are grateful for that. We are
Great.
handling 4 times the amount of abandoned boats that we did 2 years ago. So it's a lot.
Great, thanks.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Mr. Thomasini, Ms. Goslin seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Kimberly, it was unanimous. Meeting is adjourned. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Terry.
Thank you.
Good night.
Everybody have a
Night.
good night.